The silence inside the studio was almost crushing. Robert Trujillo, Metallica's bassist, set his instrument down and stared at the wall lined with memories. Black and white photos told the band's story, but one picture drew his eyes every time. A young man, wild hair spilling down, bell-bottoms swaying, and a bass guitar that looked more like an extension of his soul than an instrument. September 27, 2021, marked 35 years since that one night in Sweden that changed the band's destiny forever. People always ask what it feels like to step into Cliff Burton's shoes, Trujillo said quietly, the weight in his voice impossible to miss. The truth is, you can't. Nobody could. The only thing we can do is carry his memory as close as possible. September 27, 1986, a date etched in metal history like a scar. Metallica was on fire, riding the success of Master of Puppets. They weren't just another heavy band anymore. They were crashing the mainstream. The album had gone gold, sold 500,000 copies, and launched them into America's top 30 for the first time. Their rise felt unstoppable. That night in Stockholm, the Solna Stadium pulsed with energy. James Hetfield commanded the stage, his raw growl and guitar riffs pounding through the air like artillery. Lars Ulrich drove the band forward with relentless drumming, every strike echoing like a battle cry. Kirk Hammett's solos cut through the darkness with precision, and then there was Cliff. Stationed to the left of the stage, hair whipping like fire, he delivered a bass performance that didn't just support the band, it led it. At one point, he broke into an improvised solo of the Star-Spangled Banner. His fingers danced across the strings with the elegance of a classical virtuoso, but the violence of a metal warrior. His bell-bottom jeans, his leather jacket, his head swinging in rhythm. Cliff wasn't just playing, he was summoning something bigger than music. Kirk Hammett would later recall, Cliff had this ability to make the bass sound like anything, a guitar, a piano, even an orchestra. That night in Stockholm, he wasn't just amazing, he was transcendent. The European leg of the Damaging tour had only just begun, and Metallica was storming arenas across the continent. After conquering America with Ozzy Osbourne, it felt like nothing could stop them. But fate had other plans. After the show, the band boarded their tour bus for Copenhagen. The bus was cramped, bunks stacked on top of each other like shelves. Narrow hallways, no real comfort. Kirk Hammett and Cliff Burton both wanted the same bunk, the one with the window view. It was decided with a simple draw of the cards. Cliff pulled the ace of spades. "I think about that all the time," Hammett admitted years later, his voice haunted. "If I had drawn that card, it would have been me. I'd have been in that bunk. I'd have been thrown out the window. It could have been me instead of Cliff." As the bus pulled out of Stockholm, Cliff lingered awake, smoking, savoring the adrenaline of the night. James Hetfield lay nearby at the back, vodka in hand, trading soft words about the future. Eventually, exhaustion won. The two drifted off, unaware that tragedy was only hours away. At 6:15 a.m., the quiet shattered. The bus lurched violently, rocking side to side like a toy in a storm. Band members were tossed around their bunks, slammed into metal walls, glass exploding around them. "I woke up feeling like I was in a nightmare," Lars Ulrich remembered. Everything was shaking, metal scraping, glass breaking, people screaming. It felt like the end of the world. With a final shudder, the bus crashed onto its side. Inside was chaos, wreckage, broken furniture, and panicked voices calling out in the dark. One by one, they crawled into the cold Swedish morning. Hetfield, battered but alive. Lars, limping with a broken toe. Kirk, shaken but standing. They called out names, but one name never answered. Hammett's voice dropped to a whisper years later. "I saw his legs sticking out from under the bus. That's when we lost it. That's when we knew something was horribly wrong." Cliff Burton had been thrown from his bunk, hurled through the window, and crushed as the bus toppled over him. No seatbelts, no chance. Metallica's beating heart, silenced beneath the very road they had been conquering. The band clung to hope as emergency crews arrived. Maybe Cliff was still alive. Maybe they could save him. A crane was brought in, its chains wrapping around the overturned bus. The plan was simple: lift the wreckage and free their friend. James Hetfield would later describe the moment with a raw honesty few rock stars ever show. "We believed we could get him out. We thought he had a chance. And then, the chain slipped. The bus crashed back down, right on top of Cliff. Some witnesses say Cliff was gone from the first impact. Others believe he may have still been alive until the failed rescue sealed his fate. Either way, the outcome was the same. On that cold Swedish morning, heavy metal lost one of its brightest flames. Clifford Lee Burton was only 24 years old. The autopsy revealed the brutal truth. Cliff's chest had been crushed, his lungs badly bruised, what doctors call pulmonary contusions. He had struggled to breathe beneath the crushing weight. The thought haunted his bandmates for years. Their friend didn't just die instantly, he suffered. The pain only sharpened as questions about the crash mounted. The driver claimed black ice had sent the bus skidding. Hetfield didn't buy it. He walked barefoot through the freezing dawn, in nothing but his underwear, scouring the road for ice. There was none. "I was furious," Hetfield said later. "I saw the driver cover Cliff's body with a blanket. I yelled, 'Don't you touch him! Just tell us the truth!' I swore I could smell alcohol on him, but no test ever proved it." Investigators dismissed the black ice story, noting the road was dry and the temperature above freezing. Tire tracks told another story, one that looked more like a driver who had dozed off. Still, no charges stuck. Within weeks, the man walked free, back to driving tour buses across Europe under a new name. For Metallica, it felt like betrayal stacked on tragedy. Cliff was gone. No one was held responsible. And justice? Justice never came. Back at the hotel, the surviving members did the only thing young, grieving rockers knew how to do. They drank. Vodka, whiskey, beer, whatever dulled the pain. Lars Ulrich, toe broken and body aching, would later admit, "We didn't know how to handle it. We drowned it in vodka. We kept moving because stopping meant facing it." James Hetfield's grief boiled over into rage and despair. Fueled by liquor, he stumbled into the streets, screaming his friend's name into the night. Kirk Hammett recalled waking up to the sound, his heart breaking as he saw the band's leader unravel before his eyes. "It was the saddest thing I had ever seen," Hammett said softly. James wandering the streets, drunk, crying out for someone who was never coming back. The pain was raw, unfiltered, and merciless. Their brother was gone. The future of the band hung in the balance. And yet, within days, their manager delivered a message that cut through the haze. "Keep going." At first, it felt unthinkable, but those who knew Cliff understood. He lived by a motto: "Keep fighting, friends." To stop would have been the opposite of everything he stood for. If Metallica truly wanted to honor him, they couldn't quit. They had to carry his fire forward. Just 43 days after the crash, Metallica returned to the stage. The grief was still raw, their wounds still open, but they stood in front of a crowd once again, this time as surprise guests at a metal church show. The performance wasn't polished. It wasn't meant to be. It was heavy, messy, and drenched in emotion, but it was necessary. For Metallica, getting back on stage wasn't about perfection. It was survival. Still, the shadow of Cliff hung over everything. The question became impossible to avoid. Who could possibly step in? Who could even try? Auditions followed, dozens of bassists eager to join one of the fastest rising bands in metal. But Metallica wasn't just looking for skill, they were looking for someone who understood the impossible truth. Cliff Burton could never be replaced. The answer came in Jason Newsted. Young, hungry, and fearless, he walked into the storm with eyes wide open. Nobody resented Jason, Kirk Hammett remembered. He knew he wasn't filling Cliff's shoes. He was just helping us move forward. That took guts. But moving forward didn't mean forgetting. Cliff's death reshaped how Metallica lived, toured, and even traveled. For years after the accident, they refused to board another bus, choosing to fly instead. The trauma never left them. Kirk Hammett, still haunted by the card draw that sealed Cliff's fate, admitted, "I think about it constantly. That was supposed to be my bunk. If I had pulled the ace of spades, it would have been me under that bus. That thought never leaves me." When Robert Trujillo eventually joined Metallica in 2003, nearly 2 decades had passed, but Cliff's ghost was still present. "The first thing I learned," Trujillo explained, "was that I wasn't there to replace Cliff. You can't replace a legend. My job was to respect his legacy while carving my own place." Before Metallica, Trujillo had torn stages apart with suicidal tendencies and played alongside Ozzy Osbourne. But stepping into Cliff Burton's world was different. It carried weight. It carried expectation. Cliff was more than a bassist, Trujillo said. He was a composer, an innovator, a guy who thought differently about music. He blended Bach with metal riffs, classical movements with thrash aggression. "When I play those old songs, I'm not just playing bass lines. I'm touching his spirit. I'm connecting with someone who saw music as a weapon to break boundaries." Cliff Burton hadn't just played the bass, he had redefined what the bass could be. To understand why Cliff Burton's death ripped so deep into the heart of metal, you have to understand what he did to the instrument in his hands. In the early 80s, bass players in heavy metal rarely stepped into the spotlight. Their role was simple: hold the rhythm, stay in the shadows, let the guitars do the talking. Cliff Burton obliterated that rule. Armed with distortion, wah pedals, and a fearless sense of experimentation, he forced the bass out of the background and into the fire. His playing wasn't just support, it was a lead voice, a roar, a presence. Classical influences poured out of him, borrowing from Bach and Beethoven, weaving melody and harmony into a genre built on raw aggression. A music historian once put it bluntly: Cliff didn't play the bass like a bass, he played it like an orchestra. When he joined Metallica, the songs for Kill 'Em All were already written, but Cliff reworked every bass part, lifting them higher, reshaping the band's foundation. His wah-drenched solo, Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, wasn't just a performance, it was a manifesto. It proved the bass could scream, cry, and dominate like no other instrument on the stage. Each record with Cliff was another chapter in his revolution. On Kill 'Em All, 1983, his distorted fury carved Metallica's name into the thrash metal scene. Tracks like The Four Horsemen and Seek and Destroy hit harder because of the growl in his lines. By Ride the Lightning, 1984, Cliff's classical soul came pouring out. The Call of Cthulhu wasn't just an instrumental, it was an epic, a song that proved metal could be haunting and beautiful without a single lyric. Burton's fingerprints were all over it, a testament to his vision of the bass as more than rhythm, as something transcendent. Then came Master of Puppets, 1986, the crown jewel, the record that defined Metallica's legacy, and in many ways, Cliff's. The title track itself showcased his genius, the ability to lock down brutal rhythms while weaving melody through the chaos. Songs like Battery and Disposable Heroes pushed thrash to the brink, but Cliff's imagination kept it human, kept it alive. A metal historian once summed it up. The years with Cliff weren't just Metallica's rise, they were the peak of thrash itself. Fans still argue the band's best era died with him. Even decades later, many diehards still talk about that time as the band's golden age. The sound, the hunger, the fire, and at the center of it all was Burton, the bassist who refused to play by the rule. Even 35 years later, Cliff Burton's fingerprints remain all over Metallica and heavy metal itself. His death didn't silence him. If anything, it amplified his legend. Robert Trujillo put it best: "Every time we go on tour, I feel this reminder that life is fragile, that it can be gone in a second." Cliff's passing made Metallica realize, you don't hold back, you give it all, because you never know when it's the last time. Burton's innovations didn't vanish with him. They spread like wildfire. His bold, distorted tone, his fearless use of effects, his merging of classical and thrash, these became the blueprint for generations of bass players. Metal musicians still measure themselves against the standard Cliff set in just 3.5 years. "Cliff changed the role of the bass in metal forever," said one music professor. "He proved it could be melodic, aggressive, even orchestral. The modern sound of metal owes him more than most people realize." The recognition poured in. In 2009, Cliff was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, alongside his Metallica brothers. 2 years later, Rolling Stone named him one of the greatest bassists of all time, 9th in rock history, and 25th across all genres. But for those who knew him best, the true tributes weren't awards or magazine lists, they were memories. Cliff wasn't just a musician, James Hetfield said. He was a thinker, a free spirit. He showed us that music wasn't just about playing notes, it was about saying something real. Lars Ulrich echoed the sentiment. Cliff could make his bass sound like an orchestra one second and a chainsaw the next, but he was never pretentious. He loved metal, he loved music, and he lived it fully. Yet questions about his death still linger. The official reports cleared the bus driver, chalking it up to fatigue, maybe bad luck. But Hetfield, Hammett, and Ulrich never felt satisfied. They never found closure. Robert Trujillo admitted, "We'll probably never know the full truth of that night. What we do know is the world lost someone irreplaceable." Cliff was once in a generation. He didn't just play music, he changed it. For fans, Burton became more than a bassist. He became a symbol of pushing boundaries, of living fiercely, of refusing to settle for average. Every musician who dares to bring classical beauty into metal brutality carries a piece of him forward. When Robert Trujillo first strapped on his bass for Metallica in 2003, he knew the weight of what he was stepping into. Cliff Burton had been gone for 17 years, but his presence was everywhere, in the music, in the fans, in the very DNA of the band. People sometimes ask me if I feel pressure being in Metallica, knowing Cliff died in this seat, Trujillo said. But I don't see it as pressure. I see it as privilege. Every time I play one of those early songs, I'm honoring Cliff's spirit. I'm keeping his vision alive. Because Cliff was more than just a bassist. He was a force. He saw possibilities where others saw limits. He could weave Bach into thrash metal, turn a solo into a symphony, and make 4 strings sound like a hurricane. He wasn't just playing music, he was reshaping it. His time was short, but his impact was seismic. In just 3 albums, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets, Cliff Burton redefined what heavy metal could be. He showed the world that bass wasn't background, it was battlefront. Even today, you can hear his influence everywhere, in every band that dares to push the bass to the front. in every musician who refuses to play it safe, in every fan who still raises a fist when anesthesia-pulling teeth rattles the speakers. Cliff Burton was only 24 when the bus claimed his life, but his legacy will outlive all of us. His spirit runs through every Metallica song, every sold-out arena, every new kid who picks up a bass because they saw what he did with it. Cliff lived by a simple motto, Kirk Hammett once said, "Keep fighting, friends. Don't quit. Don't give in." And that's exactly what he left behind. A rallying cry, a reason to keep pushing, proof that music can tear down walls, rewrite rules, and change lives. On September 27, 1986, Metallica lost their brother, but the world gained a legend. That day in the studio, as Robert Trujillo laid his fingers across the strings and played the opening notes of Master of Puppets, it felt like Cliff was right there, in every note, in every vibration, in every ounce of thunder that shook the room. Clifford Lee Burton's life ended on a dark road in Sweden, but his music will never die.